let's walk through the first design for BubiWatt. So basically, the goal is to achieve a one-to-one human account, which is sovereign and durable and trust minimized and socially recoverable with a great and slick user experience. So basically, I had this idea, what if you had this magic application? You wake up one morning and you have the ability to download an app that just ticks up every day and it's giving you money. And, a lot of people talk about UBI and say that this is what humanity needs. Well, how might we achieve that? It's not so hard to give people a digital number that just ticks up that is sovereign. And it's not so hard to let people redeem that token for Bitcoin against some pool of Bitcoin as a ratio of however many tokens they have compared to the masses. And beyond that, so this protocol distributes Bitcoin. Well, it must also earn Bitcoin. So this is a novel thing, and maybe it can provide value in some new ways, and it can accumulate some Bitcoin into this pile and distribute it out to everybody. I think it's an interesting idea, and so this is an attempt to make it real. So with the idea that you're looking at this application and there's a number ticking up, you'd like to see that happen at least once a second, and so we're giving 8.6400 credits a day. 86,400 seconds in a day means 1 token per second at a base rate. On a longer duration, we could talk about it in another time, but I think that it's also important for this to be a slightly inflationary system at 2 to 3%. It's interesting because if you inflate and then distribute equally, then you flatten the wealth curve. And so it's like an automatic wealth redistribution mechanism. It's like taxation and wealth distribution, but it happens in an automated way. And that's kind of newly achievable, which I just think is cool. So basically, you see this app, it's ticking up every day. And then when you create your account, you create it with another person. You send a link to them. So it's you and your friend. And then you guys instantly have recoverability across each other. So if I lose my phone, I can go to my friend and recover my account. And then when I add a second friend, then maybe I need, I can add a third friend and a fourth friend, and I can keep increasing my security threshold and say, well, if I'm going to open up a new bank account or transfer more than 1 Bitcoin somewhere, then, maybe I need to go and talk to 7 of 14 friends, for example, and when I lose my device, same thing. We can have configurable security thresholds. So, and then in some way, if I have my app and you have your app, then we have to make sure nobody cheats. And the right way to do that is to copy Bitcoin's model and essentially have 2 classes of participants where, you're the client using your device, and then on the other end of the wire is the aggregator, and those are strictly economic participants that are collecting information and then anchoring those to Bitcoin. And so we use open timestamps to make sure that the clients are getting up-to-date information. We're able to sort that appropriately and fairly, and then bundle up that data and bam, stamp it right into Bitcoin forever. So you get this interesting phenomenon where it's kind of this, it's a social thing and it's a security thing. I consider it to be like a root of trust. And then you've achieved a one-to-one human account, which is stronger than any other type of human identity validation solution, stronger than the US passport, for example. And so I think that there's novel value in authenticating data. And when you can transform a data point into a trust minimized attributable data point about an individual, you have something interesting because, advertisers, for example, today pay middlemen to get access to your data. Well, I propose that the model should be advertisers pay you directly. They'd prefer that, you'd prefer that, you'd make more money, they'd make more money, and ultimately they will be able to serve you better. That's one example of a niche. Another example is to say, there's a lot of slop on the internet and it feels like things are being flooded by bots. And so, in the same way, Twitter has kind of a check mark to validate your identity in some way. We can do the same thing for a human account that is, again, the strongest one-to-one human account. So we can do like the blue stamp, but like on a protocol level. So it's interoperable. And my Reddit account, my X account can have my personal stamp on it to prove that I am a human. And so that becomes valuable. And then you're able to pull your data from those data silos and kind of reclaim it sovereignly and then sell it, explicitly, granularly. And when I say you sell it, I mean, this is a very easy interface. It would be like your AI agent doing this on your behalf, for example, but, you know, within your explicit trust model. So, yeah, so there is an element of permanence to this too. Um, Privacy is achievable at a later date. Essentially, what we're imprinting onto the blockchain is the time of your handshake and kind of the sessions of your handshake. It's an anonymized data bundle, but over time it does reveal some information about the user. And like I said, this is an upgradable system, so we will be able to achieve some level of privacy as we develop later. Of course, this is a credit-based system where people will have the ability to transfer tokens. And um, another interesting element of this is to say, from a one-to-one human verified account, you can also build kind of an economic ranking system for information. And that is to say, humanity can come to consensus about definitions and events, or you could say news. And so I think that this is an opportunity to kind of uh, usurp fake news, to make misinformation and disinformation economically unviable. And so you might say, well, how does that happen? Because if you have a lot of money today, then you could just pay to index your information uh, highly. And I would say, to some extent that is true. And also, if you are under one of your accounts, under a human account, if you're promoting misinformation regularly, clients will begin to filter you out. And I think that, one element of this is a pure economic ranking with kind of subclassification. So it's a multi-dimensional defense. If I have a lot of money and I want to ensure that accurate information is uh, below observability, then what I have to do is I have to economically incentivize the misinformation to outperform the accurate information. And that's a really difficult thing to achieve because, like, let's say you are defending, parent level topics and then you're defending child level topics, then you can see that that gets exponentially unviable to defend. And the other interesting thing about that is if they are economically contributing to misinformation, then they are also supporting the system, which will further usurp them with the accurate information. So, and then the other element of that is client filtering, and clients will choose to filter and collect filter lists from known propagandists and this kind of thing. Yes, we talked a little bit about one-to-one human accounts for um, interoperability with validating an individual. So that is to say, even without knowing who I am, I could go and access a third-party resource and then privately in my session, I hit an OAuth link or whatever, and I get access to that service with a trust minimized data bundle. And that's a really cool transformation that also enables trust minimized voting. With one-to-one human accounts, you get um, a real ability to impact a ballot and then get feedback about that vote and ensure that your vote actually mattered, which is transformational. Yeah, so of course everything's on chain, everything is um, transparent. That makes sense. Yeah, just a little spite. I've got to say, I have a problem with two protocols. One of those is WorldCoin, and they claim to implement a UBI off the back of AI value, but the failure is, they have not solved security. So the root of the account is secured by your eyeball. And so let me take a photo of your eyeball and add it to my cringe compilation because you've just given your password away every time you log in. And ultimately, that's true of every password based system. And we can think about passwords however we want. If we say password, if we say biometrics, if we say hardware device, ultimately, you can insert a man in the middle. If you have access to the system, you can duplicate it. And so no system is superior. You know, you can only approach um, fragmentation. The other company that I have a problem with in this space is ARweave. They claim to do data imprinting on an infinite basis for one upfront cost. And I think the failure to their reasoning is you simply cannot know the future cost of storage. And so if you're going to enable a client to pay a one-time fee for the future cost of storage, whatever your economic model is, you just cannot know that the cost of storage will not blow up tomorrow. If data centers have, if they become 100 times more expensive for whatever reason, so anyway, ARweave is just out. You just have to imprint data directly on Bitcoin. Oh yeah, so another big element of this is agent control, and that is to say, you know, a big problem, a big fear in the world today is like this idea that super intelligence is going to go haywire. And the funny thing about that is to say, you know, somebody's pushing the button. Somebody is always the one who initially kickstarted the dominoes, and so it really is as simple as adding data attribution, human data attribution. And if we can say, there's a big difference between, the AI is going to end the world versus like the man pushing the button of the AI is going to end the world. And the difference is in accountability, because once you have identity, once you have reputation, you enable accountability. And so the reason that these AI will not take off and go haywire is because we can maintain accountability about who's pushing the button. And this is also great because with this granular and modifiable data set, you're going to be able to, I was going to use the word trust. We should say you won't have to trust your AI because it will be very strictly scoped with the participants and the resources that you grant. So I think that this data primitive of the individual is kind of prerequisite infrastructure to the dangerous AI. At some point, I think that this might be kind of a moat, either this system or something very much like it will become a requirement, a regulatory requirement for governed data centers. Oh, and so there's another topic. So we could say governed data centers, and then there's also going to be black market compute. And the way to think about that is like, in what ways could user devices arbitrarily collaborate? And so you can build a data market, you can build a storage market, you can build interoperability for this to work with low friction, and then who knows what kind of interesting things could happen. I mean, I think there's a project called Swarm out of Russia. Is it Max Rabinian? And I think he came up with a network that can scale to billions of users and much more efficiently kind of store different architecture of the internet. And I think that this kind of thing, like peer-to-peer data sharding, is going to become increasingly efficient. And it makes sense to me that kind of the important bundles of data that you have, maybe you want to share those and make sure that your close peers hold copies of those, in the same way you're kind of passing the torch. And some other elements here of having a one-to-one human account that's interoperable is to say we can prevent spam on third-party sites, on Twitter. Again, clients will have the ability to filter out anything they want. And so if there's already a registry of malicious bots, I might choose to filter those from my feed. But further, if you're not using a one-to-one human protocol when it exists and it's popular, then you're not going to show up on the feed. So, the bots are eliminated. And same thing on the economic ranking, bots are eliminated. It doesn't make sense to deploy content at scale and compete in that space anymore. So I just think it's a cool innovation. Like the simple pay gate is enough to keep the automation away. Hmm. Yeah, and another big part of this, I think of Bitcoin as the biggest decentralized database and as the most pure trust minimized money. And I first became attracted to smart contracts in the context of Ethereum, but it's clear to me that Bitcoin is the better monetary system to secure smart contract execution. So the question is, how do you get the trust minimized binding between Bitcoin and smart contract platforms? And so there's Rootstock and there's a number of solutions, but it's going to be interesting to see what that race looks like. So another element of this is that if you want to consume information points from the user, then you need to pay them in some form. And so we already have these tokens coming into the account. The best way to pay the user is to ensure that their tokens have increasing value over time. And so the best way to accomplish that is to say, okay, so these tokens are in a pool and they're counterweighted against Bitcoin. And so when we burn the tokens, we reduce the liabilities against Bitcoin, then the ratio of Bitcoin to token gets better. So we want third party consumers to put Bitcoin in the system to buy the token and then burn the token. Sweet. Hmm. Yeah, so another element to that is to say, so if you're a user that has credits and you want to redeem Bitcoin, then you can either redeem instantly and you'll pay the protocol a slight slippage fee, like 1 to 3%, or you could use a bond model and you could say, okay, if I give you that redemption in 30 days, then I can give you a lock on a 0% spread. And then you can reward the patient holders. That's an awesome idea. Yeah, so one of the early interactions that I'd like to achieve on this network is the idea of uh, inscription attached to identity. Identity attached inscription. I'm sure I'll chew on some more clever ways to think about that, but essentially, for those of you that want to say something to the world, I encourage you to say it. I encourage you to speak your truth. And we have the ability to imprint data on Bitcoin permanently. And it's a cool idea. I think with the economic ranking, with the ability to imprint data, I think one of the coolest applications would be basically just a soapbox and let people access a particular endpoint to donate with a message and then just rank all those messages. And so if you believe in something and you want to blast it out to the world, then you can. And if you only have a little bit, then it still exists forever. And you can always go and look at that and you can always share that. And so I think that that's also just a really cool thing. And to be known as one of the earliest imprinting users, there are already technical people who can go and do this. But for the average person, they don't have the ability to really carve their name into stone. And we can achieve that. We can do that pretty easily. So that'll be one of the first applications built from this system. And thanks for taking the time.